What is going on, YouTube? Dad with a Bike, and in today's video we're actually going to go back in time and we're going to do kind of a re-review of the Indian Scout Bobber that I own, that I bought officially today 2 years ago. So here we are with this 2019 Indian Scout Bobber in Thunder Black ABS at 25,000 miles and 2 years of ownership. So for those of you that have been with me since the launch of my YouTube channel, you know the very first video that I put out was a review of the Indian Scout Bobber. You know, I had just recently bought it, so I was doing that good old honest owner's review. And in that review, we talked about four things. I kind of categorized these things in four little areas. We talked about power performance, we talked about handling, comfort, and aesthetics. And we're actually going to cover those again, but I'm going to give you my point of view after 2 years of ownership and 25,000 miles. So if you're looking to find out whether or not the Indian Scout Bobber is the bike for you, stick around, watch this video, and I will break down what it's been like owning it for 2 years and 25,000 miles. Alrighty, y'all, thanks for sticking around. If you're new to the channel, do me a favor, hit that subscribe and all that good stuff. And before we really dive into this, I'm going to go ahead and throw you to a video walk around of the bike, show you some of my favorite modifications that I've made to it. So check this out. So if you follow my channel, you've watched any of the videos, you probably know that I've made a ton of different modifications to this bike. And really all of the modifications that I've made to this bike center around those four areas that we categorized. And I will throw those up here again so we can tick them off one at a time. Number one is power and performance. I'm going to categorize those both in the same bucket because they kind of relate to each other, or they correlate to one another. And it's actually the main reason why I bought this bike to begin with. So when we talk about power and performance, we're talking about horsepower and torque. And more so the horsepower side of the Indian Scout Bobber, since it's such a high revving engine, right? It's a water-cooled engine. Now, off the showroom floor, the Indian Scout Bobber has a ton of power, right? It's a claimed 100 horsepower. I don't know, I'll put the specs here, what it's claimed, 70-something, 60-something, whatever, pound-foot torque. Now that's claimed. All of us know that that's not real, because when you put it on a dyno, that's not actually what you're getting. However, I can tell you that that is one of the things that turned me on the most to this bike, even brand new when I bought it. Test rode it, took it off the showroom floor, rode it home, and I was just giggling the whole time. The instant delivery of power, how fast it is, its high revving engine. It was almost like I was sitting on a mix between a cruiser and a sport bike. You know, I came over from sport bikes, and the engine performed and wants to be ridden like you would ride a sport bike. So this immediate and instant delivery of power is amazing. Now that can only be massively improved when you start doing some performance modifications. Now my performance modifications are, I have a Trask intake, I have Two Brothers 2-into-1 Compass exhaust system, and I also have a PB3 tuner, and I've taken this bike to get it dynoed. Now as this bike sits, I'm at about 105 horsepower and a little over 90 foot-pound of torque. This bike, when I get on it and the tires hook up, if the tire's not sliding out from under me, will bring the front end up. So I will power wheelie on this bike. So when it comes to power, performance, man, this bike has it all. I can't be any happier with this bike from that perspective. And that is from the time I rode it off the lot to even now. It is probably still today my most favorite quality or aspect of this bike is power and its performance. The second thing we're going to talk about is handling. Now the 2019 off the showroom floor had Kenda knobby tires on it. Those were the worst tires ever created on this planet by any man ever. They were horrible. Now, I think the newer bobbers, they come with the Pirelli Night Dragons, which are pretty decent tires. So at least Indian did a good job and they addressed that issue, because that was pretty sucky. I burned through those Kendas so fast, and I think those Kendas had a lot to do with why the handling in the beginning was kind of squirrely. It was pretty good for a cruiser, but still pretty squirrely. And then the other aspect with handling is the lean angle of the Indian Scout Bobber. It's a 29-degree lean angle. Now the downside is with that coming off the showroom floor again, is the stock suspension on the Indian Scout Bobber is extremely squishy. So one of the things that many people do with the Indian Scout Bobber, it kind of falls over, I think, some into the comfort, but for me it had more to do with handling, and that was my suspension. The stock suspension didn't cut it for me, and like I said, I come from riding sport bikes. I do ride this thing, like a sport bike. How I brake into corners, how I trail brake, all that stuff is like I would normally ride if I'm on a sport bike, and I treat this bike no different. And I would constantly grind my pegs. I grind the lower part of my exhaust a handful of times. But that got remedied when I fixed my suspension. Now, I did my rear suspension. I moved to Progressive 444s, and I did that for comfort. But I recently replaced my front suspension with Legends AXEO. It's a performance suspension. And I did that to remove some of the squishiness in the front end. Now with that comes, I removed the squishiness on the front end, so it performs a lot better. But, you get more feedback, because of that. So in some cases, if the roads are really bumpy, it's going to let you know. But you kind of want that feedback if you're trying to ride spiritedly. Now the bike itself, from a handling perspective, if we forget the lean angle for a second, it is very easy to dump over. I mean, in a turn, if you want to maneuver this thing, it is super, super easy to just flick around. I mean, you can shift your weight and the bike wants to fall over into a corner. So Indian did a hell of a job with the center of gravity on this bike, because you can be leaned over aggressively in a corner, grinding the shit out of your pegs, and still maintain your line. And that's because of how low this bike is. It's low center of gravity, and it's curb weight. It's a really light bike, given, considering that it's a cruiser. So Indian did one hell of a job there. Now when you do what I did, which is I upgraded my front suspension for better handling, that only improved everything. Now I don't grind my pegs anywhere as near. Like now I have to really push the bike to grind my pegs because my front suspension is much more stiff, and I don't typically scrape my exhaust anymore. So I solved that bit of a problem. So now, from where I was 2 years ago to where I am now, from a handling perspective, I probably went from, giving this thing like a C to giving it an A-. The lean angle will still get you, but, that's what you get for buying a bike with that slammed, low-profile look. The third thing we're going to talk about is comfort. Off the floor, this bike is probably one of the most uncomfortable bikes I've ever ridden. And I knew that when I bought it, and I was okay with that because I knew some of that could be fixed. But it's extremely uncomfortable. When Indian released the bike, when I bought the bike, they didn't have the comfort seat. Now you can buy it with a comfort seat, but at the time I bought it, that was not an option. And I remember my ride home from the dealership, which was about a 2-hour ride home. I stopped multiple times because my ass was just on fire. It hurt so bad. So if you're going to buy the Indian Scout Bobber and you think that out of the, off the showroom floor with the stock seat, we're not talking about the comfort seat, you're going to be able to lay down the miles. Don't kid yourself. Some people do it, but I promise you they don't do it without grimacing because it is uncomfortable. Now for me, I went through a few evolutions of comfort. You know, I changed out my handlebars a few times. I went from stock to drag bars. I had drag bars for a little bit because I liked my forward foot controls. And when I put the drag bar on there, boy, that took my uncomfortableness to a whole new level. So I immediately ripped those drag bars off. And I found out that the drag bars negatively impacted my my handling. So I didn't stick with them. I probably had drag bars on for all of about 3 weeks before I went and found these, which are 8-inch vaulted from Twisted Chopper. And I don't know that Twisted Chopper makes the 8-inch anymore, I'm not sure. But to me, these were perfect, right? These gave me enough of a upward relief in my hands and also gave me a far enough reach out that I had super duper awesome control over it. And it fixed the comfort quite a bit. So, you know, from when I bought the bike 2 years ago to now, I've made a lot of comfort changes. And now I can take this bike on multi-state road trips, and I do. That's why I have 25,000 miles on this bike. And for me, it's simple. I added a windscreen. So the one I have on right now is the Memphis Shades Cafe fairing, but I also have the Memphis Shades Road Warrior fairing. And I swap the two out depending on what I'm doing. Like out here when I'm out just ripping around town and I'm not going far distances, I throw the Cafe on because I like the look. If I am out battling the road or I know I'm going to be out for a long time, I throw the Road Warrior on and all is good. And that helps take the wind directly off my chest so I can sit upright and be comfortable when I ride. The other thing I did, which I've already mentioned, is the handlebars. So I swapped out the handlebars. And like I said, I went through a couple of variations, but now I've settled on the 8-inch. I think probably there's some that come from FMB that are like 10-inch that I bet would be even better for me, but I don't want to spend more money on handlebars. These do me right now. The other thing I did was I swapped out my seat. I've got 2 different seats depending on what I'm doing. I have the Saddlemen Renegade LS solo seat, which my butt is sitting on right now, and I like that seat a lot. I like Saddlemen. And the other one is a Mustang Jared Mees signature seat. It's meant for the Indian Scout, but it works on the Indian Scout bobber for what I needed it for. And that's for, you know, I use that largely when I'm two-up riding. When my daughter wants to go for a ride or something with me, I throw that seat on so she can ride. And then the last thing I did for comfort was I swapped out my rear shocks. I went to Progressive 444s. So now when I look at comfort from when I bought it to what I have now, that's perfect. There's absolutely no reason for me to buy another bike anytime soon. I will ride the wheels off this thing because it is now comfortable for me, and I can do long distance travel with it. I do it all the time. So it works very, very well for me. So comfort from, like I said, from coming off the showroom floor to now, I fixed it. Coming off the showroom floor, sucks balls, you get an F. Indian, you should make that comfort seat stock. And lastly but not least, aesthetics. The aesthetics of this bike is amazing. If you just Google Indian Scout Bobber Custom, you will find so many different ways in which people have modified their Indian Scout Bobber to fit the way they want it to look. And off the showroom floor, it is a beautiful, beautiful bike. Minus the ugly exhaust they put on it, but whatever, that's fixable. But it is aesthetically pleasing. There is, I can't count the number of times I've taken this bike somewhere and people go out of their way to come over and talk to me about the bike because it was so striking, it caught their eye. What is that? Oh my goodness, it's such an awesome looking bike. You know, all kinds of compliments get thrown my way on this bike. And I guarantee you, if you buy one, it'll be the same for you. Now, we all have different tastes when it comes to aesthetics, but the way that I have my bobber set up, actually I set it up multiple different ways depending on what I'm doing. If I'm doing in-town riding, it's set up like you see now, or like you saw in the walk around. And if I'm out hitting the roads, putting on the miles, it's set up like this picture. So for aesthetics, this bike is amazing. Beautiful bike. I think it's one of the most beautiful bikes Indian makes right now. To be honest, I love the look of the bobber. There's just something about it. It's just amazing. So aesthetically, bueno. So let's close this sucker down. If you are looking for a fast, fun, nimble bike, go test ride an Indian Scout Bobber. I promise you it will not disappoint. However, I warn you, make sure that you truly understand what you're getting into from a comfort perspective. There's a lot of people who buy this bike and then they go and return it, or don't return it, but they go trade it right back in for something more comfortable because they didn't really realize it. My recommendation to you, and this is my recommendation for any bike you want to buy, a test ride is not going to do it. For $100 to $120, you can rent a bike for 6 hours. Indian does this. Eagle Rider does this for Harley Davidson. Spend the money. Go rent a bike. Ride it. I mean, truly, truly ride it. And put it through its paces. And you make that decision on whether or not you think that is the bike for you. Right now, this Indian Scout Bobber is the bike for me. I love this bike. I will not be getting rid of it anytime soon. And this bike and I are going to go have some other amazing adventures. Many, 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 many amazing adventures. And with that, I'm going to leave you. I hope you all found this helpful. And if you did, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Throw me a like. Give me a comment. Tell me what you think about the Indian Scout Bobber. If you're an owner, what are your likes, dislikes? And if you're not an owner, you know, what is it or what questions do you have that I can help? What can I answer to help you make your decision on the Indian Scout Bobber? Anyway, I'm going to bid you all adieu. Y'all be safe, be kind to one another, be nice. Peace.